The raiding experience in TBC Classic so far has been really awesome. It's nothing like Vanilla WoW, where every single raid comp was 25 warriors and 15 classes that help warriors. To me, it feels like you can get away with playing any spec and class that you want. Everyone brings at least something to a raid, and my choice of class is Feral Druid, because it's seemingly the only thing in this game that I'm actually good at. But people say that it does no damage, and that it's nothing more than a 4-legged crit buff, and that's why I have made it my goal to become the strongest and greatest Feral Druid in existence, because Phase 2 of TBC is here, and with it comes the raids Serpentshrine Cavern and Tempest Keep, and I cannot wait to raid it for my first time ever. So starting things off, we are actually going straight into a Karazahn run, because my guild decided that we are doing one last parse run, the last chance to get the biggest parses we can. But first, let's talk about loot and soft reserves. Well, we have none, because we are full Phase 1 bis. And I know I could soft reserve the mount from the first boss, but you know, we're playing Druid, and I don't really need a mount, do I? As for the parsing, well, the first two bosses went very badly for me. I just got unlucky with dodges and stuff, and it messed up my rotation. That doesn't really matter though, since I didn't need the parses on the first two anyway, since I think I was second on the first boss and fourth on Morose. However, what we did need was pretty much everything else. At the time, I don't think I was rank 1 on any fights, and as someone trying to get rank 1 in the raid, that's obviously not very good. However, that would all change at Maiden of Virtue, because the fight just went perfectly. We got very lucky on dodges and some good omen procs at the right times, and I was able to get up to 2.4k DPS, which was indeed a 100 parse. The same cannot be said about Nightbane, unfortunately, because this is a very hard boss to parse on for melee, because in order to do it properly, we would need to split the groups evenly between melee and casters, and since this is a melee run, we did average at best. He also one-shot me. As for the curator, he also went incredibly well, and I believe this was the one fight that I needed to massively improve on. And I think at the time I was around 50 or 60th, and this fight was also a 100 parse. Granted, we did use a bit of a cheese strategy here, where we basically go down into the basement and use the warlock to enslave one of the dread beasts, which just do so much damage, it's like having a whole other player there. I also managed to get a 100 parse on Terestian Illhoof. Again, it just went incredibly well. No dodges, no misses, and I didn't get targeted with the sacrifice mechanic. And I managed to get up to 3k DPS. And the final boss that I desperately needed a parse on is Shade of Aran. Now typically my performance on this boss is quite good. However, there is sadly a very big RNG element, and that's when he casts Arcane Explosion. If he does cast it, then obviously you've got to run away, which means you've got less uptime, which means lower parse. However, there is a small chance that he will not cast Arcane Explosion at all, and this run was finally the run where he didn't, and I was able to get up to 3k DPS again, and the group also let me have the blue beam on Netherspite. However, I massively messed it up because I decided to try something that I saw in one of your guys' comments. One of you guys said that the play on Netherspite was to only Ferocious Bite instead of a mix of Rip and Ferocious Bite. Well, that was a lie, as I ended up doing almost 2k less DPS than before. And that was it really, our final Karazhan raid of Phase 1. And the results? We did end up in rank 1. Can you believe it? All that hard work and dedication for some numbers on a third-party website. I'd say worth it. So a few days after our very successful Karazhan run, Phase 2 was finally released. And I'll be honest, I didn't really get a chance to play. It all came out at just a very bad time for me. So the next time I logged on to Cat, it was raid night. And for our first raid of Phase 2, it is Serpentshrine Cavern. And walking into here for the first time, I was so excited. Raiding is just one of my favourite things to do, and to get 2 brand new raids was awesome. Now going into this raid, I had done literally zero research prior. I didn't know the mechanics, I didn't know the bosses. Hell, I didn't even know what the theme of the raid was. I had a sneaking suspicion that it was themed around the Naga, since it's located right next to slave pens and Underbog, and given the sheer amount of spaghetti monsters, I would say I was correct. So as we were making our way towards the first boss now, let's talk about the loot. So for every week past the first week, we planned on doing SSC and Tempest Keep back to back in one night. However, for the first ID, which is this week, we are splitting the raids into two, which means tonight we get 3 soft reserves total. So for our first one, the Ring of Lethality. In the last phase, one of our best rings was the Ring of the Recalcitrant, and you'll notice that the Ring of Lethality is exactly the same, except we get 19 hit at the cost of 4 attack power. For our second soft reserve, the Tsunami Talisman. Now for us, this is our Dragonspine trophy. This is miles better for us than DST, and it should last us all the way up until Wrath of the Lich King. So the sooner we get this trinket, the better. Now I know some of you will probably wonder why I have not soft reserved the Belt of 100 Deaths. Well, the first drop is hard reserved for our main tank, which can't really complain at that. Plus, it'll be so contested anyway, and the chances of me actually getting it are super low, so I'd prefer to just get the small stuff out of the way first. So on to the first boss now, Hydros the Unstable. Now like I said, I went into the raid having 0 research done, and since then, I still haven't done any research, and I still couldn't tell you what this boss actually does. I know he does have something to do with frost resistance tanks and nature resistant tanks, not 100% sure though. I am, however, painfully aware of the water tomb mechanic. Basically, it targets one player, and all players within 8 yards of that player get stunned. And as a parsing fiend, I dislike RNG mechanics like this because obviously I want 100% uptime, right? In the future, we did end up splitting the melees up into 3 camps just to prevent every single melee from getting stunned. But this is the first week. Things are expected to be a little messy, right? Plus, I wasn't too concerned with parsing right now anyway. I was far more interested in just seeing and learning the raid. For his loot, sadly, no Ring of Lethality, but that's okay, we've still got the trinket to look forward to. We then take the next few minutes to clear up the trash. It's nothing massively special. The trash does, however, hit a lot harder than Karazhan trash. There's definitely a lot more care put into these pools, with mage sheeps and stuff like that. We did actually end up skipping over the lurker below for now, and moved straight into Leaoauras the Blind, which is indeed the boss that can drop us our Tsunami Talisman trinket. Now he is a little bit more complicated than most bosses we've seen so far. First of all, he has this whirlwind ability, which I was trying my best to avoid. However, some people just didn't seem to care and were just charging face first into him, which is what I started doing every week past this one because it doesn't actually do as much damage as you think it does. But after about 30 seconds of combat, Leaoauras transforms himself into a big scary demon guy. I'm not sure what significance the demon has, but he starts to target players with an ability that creates images of himself to attack them, and it's that player's job to kill them. Lucky for us, we were not one of the targets and could continue the parse at a somewhat decent pace. But we managed to get him down, and I excitedly opened up that loot table, and what did I see? Tsunami Talisman dropped on the first week of the first raid. I got so excited, I'm pretty sure I made an audible sound. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. This is me we are talking about. I'll probably end up rolling a massive 4. But not too long after killing Leaoauras, we were already in the next room and onto the third boss, Fathom Lord Karazhan. Now, despite this being a cleave fight, and it being a bit of a visual mess, this boss isn't actually bad at all. If you look at the list of mechanics, which I just looked at for the first time, like right now, you might go into this thinking it'll be a shit show. But you know, this is post-nerf and nothing really does anything. So apart from killing totems, this fight is just a stand and stab kind of deal. Not that I would actually participate in mechanics anyway. That would be silly. But this fight went incredibly well for me. Very few dodges, and I remained at a consistent 2.2k DPS the entire fight. And lads, this was our first 100 parse of phase 2. For the next boss, it is Morrowgrim Tidewalker. Can't lie though, this is a bit of a boring one for us. I'm pretty sure this is more of a tank fight, as I have heard he does smack pretty hard. But for DPS, this is mostly just a stand and stab, which to be honest I don't mind too much. I'm perfectly happy to just stand around and do my rotation. Things however did go a little bit wrong, where our main tank Tyan got two-shot by the boss. This is what I mean by it's a tank fight. And sadly, I was the second person on threat, so I was the next person to go. And unsurprisingly, that did lead us to our first wipe in phase 2. But no worries, we all regrouped and went straight back at him. Now, despite this being a relatively boring fight for us, he does like to spawn in massive waves of like 20 Murlocs at once, and popping a super sapper charge right in the middle of them might be one of the most satisfying things I've seen yet. For his loot, he did end up dropping the Talon of Azshara, which I believe is a best in slot weapon for quite a few melees. This was definitely a very good run loot wise. So we made our way back through to the main room of the raid and go down to the center pool to fight the lurker below, who has a really cool way to spawn him in, because he's not like every other boss where he's kinda just hanging around waiting for a 25-man raid to come fight him. You actually have to fish him up out of the pool. And I like to think, back in 2007, what was the reactions to doing this like? You know, if I think this is so cool, what would it have been like for the first ever raid group to do this? However, the fight itself, not as cool. Can't lie, this was a very frustrating boss to kill, primarily because of his little knockback ability, where more times than not, it would fling me right off of the platform, which leads to a very low uptime. He also has this sprout ability, which isn't really much of anything, you basically just run in a circle, and then if you fail to kill the boss fast enough, he goes into another phase, where he basically dips down under the water, and a few adds come to attack us. Now this is where things are getting really rough for me, because the guild that I'm in isn't some crazy top level guild. We are just a pug guild, which naturally means that we have slow kills, but quite annoyingly, for a lot of the bosses in this phase, you need to kill them really fast to avoid combat phases if you want to parse efficiently, and sadly, this is just another one of those bosses. But with the lurker now out of the way, it's time for us to move on to the final boss of the raid, Lady Vash. I believe this is a boss that is quite famous for being very difficult, but not anymore. Since this is post-nerf, apparently a lot of the mechanics were cut out of this fight and were made pretty damn easy. So after a minute of attacking her, she enters into her phase 2, where basically there's a bunch of these elementals that are trying to reach Lady Vash. There's these big lanky things that are stomping around for the casters to kill, and there's some Naga for the melees to kill. And during all of this, there's a mechanic revolving around the Tainted Core, where basically you've got to pass it along a line of players to reach the shield thingies to destroy it. And we did have proper assignments and stuff where 5 players go into each zone to do the Tainted Core. However, me being me, every time I saw the Tainted Core, I ran in the opposite direction because I didn't understand the mechanic at the time, which seemed to work pretty well because no one questioned it. So once all 4 of these shield thingies are gone, Lady Vash is once again killable. So we get her down, and very excitingly, the belt of 100 deaths dropped. Granted, we aren't allowed to roll on it, but at least we've gotten Tyan's belt out of the way, and we can roll on future belts. But now it's time for the exciting part, rolling on the loot, and I was buzzing, knowing that I could be getting my biggest upgrade right here, right now, on the first raid of the phase. So after rolling out all of the garbage, the talisman is called to be rolled on. My first roll was nothing but a 50 roll, not a good start at all, but my second roll, we rolled a 100. I don't think in the history of me raiding, I have ever rolled a 100 on a piece of loot, let alone my biggest upgrade on the very first raid of the phase. So after a very successful first phase 2 raid, it was time for us to start working on something else for a bit. And one of the biggest upgrades I could get right now is my weapon, because with the release of phase 2 comes a new PvP season, and I wanted to get the Merciless Gladiator's Maul. I mean, just look at it. It's nuts. We get strength, hit, crit, and 1010 attack power. The next best in slot item would be the Terrestrian Strangle Staff, and even just looking at it, the difference is night and day. But in order for us to get it, we'd have to actually do PvP. And if you know me, then you know I just really don't care for PvP in this game. I mean, I don't mind the odd world PvP fight here and there, but other than that, I'm just really not that interested. Lucky for me though, I have connections. My friend Lynn Farrow, who I featured in quite a few videos now, is a bit of a PvP fiend. He loves arena and BGs and all that stuff, and he said to me, if I want, I am welcome to join him and his gladiator rogue friend to do threes, but first, I was tasked with getting some PvP gear, because unlike vanilla WoW, the TBC PvP gear is almost a must-have, because it all has this resilience stat, and we want to stack as much of that as possible. But in order for us to purchase this gear, we had to get a load of these marks of honor from different battlegrounds. So, that's exactly what I did. For a couple hours every night, I would sit and spam the hell out of battlegrounds. But in amongst all of the PvP nonsense, raiding time once again came around. But this time, we are heading into the other Phase 2 raid, Tempest Keep. Now if I enjoyed this raid even a fraction as much as I did SSC, I would be happy. Whilst we are just clearing towards the first boss, let's talk loot. Lucky for us, this raid's loot has quite a lot more than SSC, but this time I believe we only got 2 SRs instead of 3. So for my first one, the Vam Braces of Ending. It's literally just a direct upgrade from our Nightfall wrist guards, giving us 6 more attack power and a gem slot. It's simple but very good. And for my last soft reserve, the Verdant Sphere from Kil'Thas. Turning this thing in will allow us to grab the Telonicus's Pendant of Mayhem, which is best in slot for us right up until the final phase of TBC, under most conditions anyway. Plus the Verdant Sphere has a 100% drop chance, so even if nothing else dropped, we will always have at least something to roll on. Now like I said, this raid also has a crap ton of other good stuff for us to get, like the Gloves of Searing Grip, Leggings of Murderous Intent, and the Thalassian Wilder Cloak. But that's all for another time. So moving on to our first Tempest Keep encounter, it is the boss Alar. This is a bit of a weird fight, I won't lie. We first start things off on the top ledge, where Alar goes through 3 different health phases, each time moving further along the platform until eventually he dies. But he's not dead quite yet, because he emerges from the center of the room back at full health again. Now despite this being a bit of a pain in the ass to fight, I think the devs have designed this fight really well, because obviously this guy is a Phoenix, they've really used that theme to its full extent. Because once again, Alar goes through different health phases. Every time we get him down to the next phase, he flies up into the air and transforms himself into a literal meteor and comes crashing down onto a player, and he emerges from the ashes of said meteor again. There's also a load of exploding baby phoenixes, which is cool I suppose. Now very unfortunately, we get Alar down and I opened up the loot table to see what dropped, and the Gloves of Searing Grip dropped. And the annoying thing is, the reason I didn't soft reserve these is because I actually thought that they were hard reserved for the first drop. So imagine my surprise when I realized they in fact are not. So we make our way through to the next room where the next boss is and start to clear up the trash. And interesting thing about these guys is they just do an insane amount of damage. So much that we are having to banish and polymorph all but one mob at a time. And it's interesting because this is post nerf, and yet we still have to take such precaution against these guys. I mean seriously, what were these guys doing to you in pre-nerf? But after slowly taking out all of the trash mobs, we are on to the boss himself, Void Reaver. Now luckily this is again just a bit of a tank fight. We have no responsibility other than stabbing the boss in quick succession. And while this fight was going really nicely, damage was looking really good, we had a nice pace, but sadly I was second on threat, which means Void Reaver decided it was my time, and he turned around and 2-shot me. Luckily my death means nothing though, and the group were able to finish him off very easily. But after a couple of trash mobs, we are on to the next boss, High Astromancer Solarian, the boss that can drop us our new bracers. And this is probably the most annoying boss so far. She's fun because you can get your damage really high, like 3k plus, but this fight doesn't have a tank, and instead she's constantly targeting random players with arcane missiles. Now that's nothing, that's not really a big deal, but for us, that's bad, because she's constantly changing direction, and our main damage ability Shred can only be used from behind. But after about 20 seconds of fighting her, she vanishes from sight and a second phase begins. A load of these very squishy adds spawn in, and that's it. She then comes back to existence and we start fighting her like nothing happened. But after another 10 or so seconds, she transforms herself into a massive demon blob, which was apparently quite scary because myself and a very large portion of the raid ended up dying. But of course, the group were able to clean her up nicely. And sadly for us, no bracers. But that means the only remaining boss for us to kill is Karazhan himself. This is by far the longest boss fight we've seen so far, because there is a crap ton of moving parts and random stuff going on. For the first phase, we don't actually kill Karazhan yet, but instead he animates 4 different adds to attack us. The first is pretty simple, he fixates on one player and we've just got to kite and kill it. The second one is Lord Sanguinar, who I think is basically just a warrior. He's got a big AoE fear, but that's about it. The third is Grand Astromancer Capernian. She's not really for us to deal with, since she's a caster and has a confligate ability, which stuns you if you get too close. So we just hang around for a bit until she's dead. The fourth and final add is Master Engineer Telonicus, who I think is basically just a technician from Blackwing Lair, and he likes to constantly throw bombs around. Once they're all dead, Karazhan then summons a load of legendary weapons to come and attack us. Nothing too special about these, we just AoE'd them down. But an interesting thing about these that I didn't know at the time is that once you kill the weapons, you can actually pick them up and equip and use them to kill Karazhan. How cool is that? But moving on to stage 3 now. We still aren't quite on to killing KT yet, but he now animates all 4 of the original adds at once, which sounds worse than it actually is. So long as everyone is careful, it's really not much of anything. But after stage 3, we are finally on to KT himself, which honestly is the simplest part of the entire fight. Now as for parsing on this boss, well, the fight does have logs, but it doesn't actually count towards your overall rank, which I think is because there's just too much crap going on at once, which honestly I very much like. And that's it. We have cleared Serpentshrine Cavern and Tempest Keep, and well, I gotta say, these raids are fantastic. In terms of the overall vibe, I still think I prefer Karazhan, but the fights, the length, the mechanics, these bosses felt way better to fight than any of the Karazhan bosses. Now in terms of the loot from Tempest Keep, the only thing that dropped that we could roll on was the Verdant Sphere, and I managed to get a pathetic 43 roll. So now that our weekly raids were cleared, the only thing left for us to do was to head back into Battlegrounds and farm out more badges. And that's exactly what I was doing, when very randomly, Linfaro messaged me and said, "We go arena now." And I said, "Hang on, I've not got any gear yet." And he basically said, "Ah fuck it, we go anyway." So, my first time in arena. To be honest, with me not being the biggest fan of PvP, I wasn't looking forward to it that much, especially since our comp was a bit questionable. Double feral rogue. Okay, sure, there are certainly worse comps you could run, and I'm aware that a very good one is double rogue feral, and this is basically that, but worse. However, we were able to make up for it since I did have 2 gladiators here to carry me. And well, our first few games went incredibly well, obviously since we are starting way down at 1500 rating and our MMR isn't completely ruined yet. And we were able to get a good 150 rating after only like 5 or so games. However, things really started to fall apart, because it became abundantly clear that my lack of PvP gear makes me incredibly squishy. So I did eventually have to switch over to using my tanking set. And I gotta give it to Lynn and Riley, because it was very clear that I was dragging these two down, with lack of gear and experience. But they were very patient, and they were trying to teach me all of the intricacies. You know, what abilities to use when, what to do against certain comps, and I learned that paladins completely screwed our entire game plan. And one of the most important things I learned is that we needed to make sure that warriors were never allowed to be warriors. Obviously, with us being double feral rogue, we are incredibly vulnerable to massive swords, and all it would take would be one or two big swings and we would be dead. But I've come to the realization that PvP in WoW doesn't really have anything to do with mechanical skill. It's mostly knowledge based. If you can memorize what every class and comp is trying to do, then you just do whatever counters that. But after about 3 hours of total playtime spread over the course of 2 days, we were successful in reaching 1700 rating, which is all we really needed to do in order for us to get our new weapon. Now, like I said previously, I'm just not really that big a fan of PvP in this game, but you know what, this was fun. I had a really good time playing with these two. And again, massive shout out to Lynn Farrow and Riley, because I 100% would have never managed this on my own. But now that we had gotten the rating that we needed, we still of course needed to get ourselves the required amount of points to buy it. Lucky for us, there is a boatload of these point groups. Basically, we go in and do 10 games of 5v5, and we don't care at all if we win or lose, because by simply playing 10 games weekly, that will give us a couple thousand points. So I ended up doing that for 2 straight weeks, and come the weekly reset, we finally had enough points for us to buy our brand new best in slot weapon. And well, that's kinda it for Phase 2, I'm afraid. Apart from the raids and the new PvP season, there's honestly not a whole lot going on. Of course, I've continued to raid every single week, and the only other piece of loot I've been able to pick up was the Ring of Lethality. And for the first 3 weeks in a row of this phase, the belt of 100 deaths dropped. However, my loot luck has apparently ran out, because my rolls ever since getting Talisman have been absolutely terrible. And even now, I haven't managed to get any upgrades whatsoever. And the parsing also hasn't been very great. Our kill times are really just too low at the moment, since we are just a pug group. But we are improving every single week, so hopefully soon we can start to one-phase those pesky fights. And I know some of you may be thinking, what about Swift Flight form? Well, put simply, I can't afford it. As much as I would love to go through the quest chain and do the Sethic Halls boss summon, etc., I just don't have enough gold right now. However, that is something that is right at the top of my priority list. I'm farming gold every day, I'm buying and selling on the auction house constantly, and I've even made some very risky investments. So if those pay off, hopefully very soon we will be able to get epic flying. However, that is definitely something for another day. I hope you all enjoyed today's video, because I enjoyed making it. I apologise for the Phase 2 video taking this long to make. I'll be honest, I kinda forgot that we hadn't done one yet. I think since I made the cat guide video, I had it in my head that we had done it, but whatever, it's here now. As for content, well, I've decided I'm going to make a video on a character that we haven't played for a very long time. So, I'm excited to play that again. After that, I think there might actually be yet another druid video, because like I said, we've still got epic flying, and I'm also starting to prep for Phase 3 of TBC and all that good stuff. So a nice couple of videos lined up for us, and I'm hoping you're looking forward to them as much as I'm looking forward to making them. Anyway, I think that is enough yapping for today. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you all later.